Before we begin, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because the stories we share here are not gossip, not rumors, but the untold human truths hidden behind Hollywood's smiles. Today's story is not about fame or glamour. It's about survival. For more than 20 years, Sharon Stone lived with a truth she never fully spoke out loud. While the world remembered her as the fearless icon of the 1990s, the woman who commanded the screen with intelligence, beauty, and power, her real life was quietly unraveling in ways no red carpet could ever show. At 66 years old, Sharon Stone has finally decided that silence no longer serves her. What she reveals now isn't meant to shock for attention, but to correct history. It's a story of betrayal, medical failure, financial loss, motherhood, and a fight for identity after everything familiar was taken away. This is not the version of Sharon Stone people thought they knew. This is the version that survived when everything else collapsed. Paragraph 2. The day everything changed. In September of 2001, Sharon Stone's life split into a before and an after. It was an ordinary afternoon inside her San Francisco home, the kind of quiet moment no one expects to become life-altering. She stood behind a sofa when a sudden, explosive pain tore through her head with such force that it felt like lightning detonating inside her skull. The pain was not gradual. It was violent, immediate, and unbearable. Her body collapsed before her mind could process what was happening. She lost consciousness and fell to the floor alone. When she eventually woke, hours later, nothing felt right. The room spun. Her thoughts were fractured. Her body felt foreign, uncooperative, unstable. At that moment, Sharon didn't know that her vertebral artery had ruptured, that blood was flooding spaces around her brain, neck, and spine. She didn't know she was already in a fight for survival. She only knew that something inside her had broken, and that the woman she had been moments earlier was gone. Paragraph 3. Ignored, dismissed, and misdiagnosed. At 43 years old, Sharon Stone was at the peak of her career. To the outside world, she appeared invincible. Inside her head, her brain was literally drowning. Disoriented and frightened, she tried to help herself the only way she knew how. She stumbled to her car, hopping to drive for help, but her body betrayed her again. Her left foot went numb. Her speech began to slur. Tears came without warning. Neighbors had to physically pull her from the vehicle and help her back inside. Instead of emergency services, she was given an aspirin by her son's nanny, unaware that aspirin could worsen internal bleeding. Sharon did not call 911. She didn't understand what was happening, and no one around her recognized the danger. When she finally reached the hospital, nearly 72 hours had passed. Doctors performed an angiogram and found nothing. Their conclusion wasn't caution. It was dismissal. They assumed she was exaggerating, dramatic, or imagining symptoms. It was only because her best friend refused to leave and demanded further testing that a second angiogram was ordered. That test revealed the truth. Sharon Stone was bleeding into her brain and would not survive without immediate surgery. Paragraph 4. Surgery saved her life, but took her old one. The doctors moved fast once the truth could no longer be denied. Sharon underwent an endovascular coiling procedure, where surgeons threaded a catheter from her groin into her skull to stop the hemorrhage. The surgery saved her life, but it did not restore it. When she woke up, she was alive, but she was not the same person who had gone under anesthesia. The bleeding had damaged areas of her brain responsible for speech, memory, vision, and motor control. Within just 9 days, she lost nearly 18% of her body weight. She later described looking in the mirror and seeing what felt like a stranger, a fragile body she barely recognized. There were no structured stroke recovery programs at the time, no roadmap, no real guidance. She was sent home and expected to heal on her own, but healing was not a straight line. It was chaos. Her face drooped on one side. Her eye wouldn't stay open. She stuttered so badly she couldn't finish sentences. Walking felt like learning gravity all over again. The pain didn't end with survival. It began there. Paragraph 5. 7 years the world never saw. The public disappearance of Sharon Stone wasn't a retreat from fame. It was a battle for basic human function. She experienced seizures without warning, terrifying reminders that her brain had been permanently altered. Her vision fractured into distorted colors and patterns. Reading became impossible. Scripts looked like abstract shapes instead of words. Memorization, once effortless, was now unreachable. For years, she lived in constant fear that another bleed would happen without warning. Painful knots formed beneath her scalp, swelling like bruises from inside her skull. Emotionally, she was isolated. Her marriage collapsed under the weight of fear and uncertainty. Hollywood moved on quietly, assuming she would never return. She had no extended family nearby. She forced herself into exhausting routines, relearning balance, repeating words, practicing walking straight, labeling clothes with written reminders because memory failed her. For nearly 7 years, Sharon Stone vanished from public view, not because she chose silence, but because survival demanded every ounce of strength she had left. Paragraph 6. The financial betrayal. While Sharon Stone was fighting to relearn how to live, another devastating blow was quietly unfolding behind closed doors. During her most vulnerable period, when she could barely read documents or understand conversations, people she trusted took control of her finances. She later discovered that her entire fortune, nearly $18 million earned over decades of work, was gone. Not misplaced, not mismanaged. Gone. Her refrigerator wasn't in her name. Her phone bill wasn't hers. Even personal possessions had been transferred. She described opening accounts and realizing she had nothing. Zero. This betrayal hurt deeper than the medical trauma. Sharon had spent her career fighting to be taken seriously, negotiating contracts carefully, refusing to be reduced to her looks. Yet all that discipline meant nothing when people saw her weakness as opportunity. She stayed silent out of shame, fearing public blame. While the world assumed she stepped away from Hollywood by choice, she was rebuilding her life from financial ruin, one piece at a time. Paragraph 7. Marriage collapse and custody loss. As her body struggled to heal, her personal life collapsed completely. Sharon's marriage ended during her recovery, and soon after, she faced a custody battle over her adopted son, Rowan. At the very moment she needed support, she faced litigation. She was still experiencing seizures, memory loss, and exhaustion so severe she sometimes slept 18 hours a day. Court documents were nearly impossible to process. Travel was physically dangerous. Yet the legal system did not see a healing woman. It saw instability. She later admitted she wasn't strong enough to fight the way she needed to. She lost primary custody of her son, a pain she has described as the deepest heartbreak of her life. To maintain their relationship, she traveled whenever her health allowed, often collapsing afterward. Motherhood became both her motivation and her burden. Instead of giving up, she reorganized her entire life around survival, healing, and being present for her child in whatever way she could. Paragraph 8. Choosing a new life instead of the old one. At some point, Sharon Stone realized she could not rebuild the life she had before. That life no longer existed, so she made a radical decision to create a new one. She focused on spiritual grounding, quiet healing, and rebuilding her cognitive abilities without rushing herself back into the public eye. She adopted 2 more children, creating a home centered on stability, safety, and unconditional love. Motherhood became her anchor. Despite losing her health, her marriage, her fortune, and much of her career, she refused to lose her identity. Her days were structured around discipline, rest, meditation, and care. This wasn't reinvention for image. It was survival through acceptance. Slowly, piece by piece, Sharon rebuilt herself in ways Hollywood would never understand. Paragraph 9. Hollywood's cold shoulder. When Sharon finally considered returning to work, she discovered that Hollywood had quietly erased her. She was no longer seen as powerful. She was seen as fragile, damaged, risky. 7 years away in Hollywood time is an eternity. New stars had replaced her. Executives had changed. Assumptions filled the silence around her disappearance. No one asked what happened. They assumed she couldn't handle it anymore. Even when she was ready, her brain required careful management. She labeled outfits. She rested before meetings. She structured every day to avoid neurological overload. These weren't preferences. They were necessities. Still, she refused to disappear. Paragraph 10. The slow return. Sharon's return was not a triumphant comeback. It was cautious, measured, and deeply intentional. Small roles, independent projects. Each one tested her mental endurance. Gradually, directors began to see what Hollywood had forgotten. Her talent remained. One of the most important moments came when Steven Soderbergh cast her in Mosaic in 2018. The role mirrored her reality, power mixed with vulnerability. For the first time in years, audiences saw Sharon Stone not as a relic but as an artist reborn. She wasn't chasing fame. She was reclaiming purpose. As Sharon Stone slowly regained control over her life, something unexpected happened. The pain she had endured began to transform into purpose. For years, she had carried her suffering in silence, believing that speaking about it would only invite judgment, dismissal, or pity. But with time came perspective, and with perspective came resolve. Sharon realized that what nearly killed her wasn't just a ruptured artery, but a system that repeatedly failed to listen to women. Doctors ignored her symptoms. Medical professionals doubted her pain. Critical hours were lost because her voice wasn't taken seriously. And she knew she wasn't alone. Millions of women experience similar dismissal every year. So Sharon began to speak, carefully at first, then boldly. She shared how stroke symptoms in women are often misunderstood, misdiagnosed, or minimized. She explained how neurological trauma doesn't end when surgery is over, how recovery is long, lonely, and invisible. She stopped framing her story as tragedy and started presenting it as evidence. Evidence that women deserve better medical research, better diagnostic standards, and better care. Her advocacy wasn't performative. It was personal. Every panel she chaired, every interview she gave, carried the weight of survival. She wasn't asking for sympathy. She was demanding change. For decades, Sharon Stone avoided discussing the financial betrayal that followed her stroke, not because it didn't matter, but because it hurt too deeply. Losing money is painful. Losing everything while incapacitated is devastating. But losing it at the hands of people you trusted is a wound that doesn't heal easily. When Sharon finally spoke to The Hollywood Reporter and Vogue, she did so with clarity, not anger. She explained how exploitation doesn't always look violent or obvious. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it hides behind paperwork, signatures, and legal language you're too sick to understand. She described a period where her brain could only process colors and patterns, where reading felt impossible, and where survival consumed all her energy. That was the moment others chose to take control of her assets. By the time she understood what had happened, nearly $18 million was gone. Sharon emphasized that wealth does not protect you from vulnerability. Fame does not shield you from exploitation. Illness strips away defenses, and predators wait for that moment. By sharing this truth publicly, she wasn't reclaiming money. She was reclaiming dignity. And she was warning others that silence only protects those who exploit it. At 66 years old, Sharon Stone no longer defines strength the way Hollywood once did. Strength is no longer about dominance, perfection, or control. It's about endurance. It's about getting up on days when your body resists you. It's about choosing joy when bitterness would be easier. Sharon openly admits that she still lives with neurological effects from her stroke. Her body still reminds her of what she survived. But instead of hiding those realities, she honors them. She understands now that vulnerability is not weakness, and survival is not something to be ashamed of. Her identity is no longer tied to being the most desired woman in the room or the most powerful name on a casting list. It's rooted in motherhood, self-awareness, and hard-earned peace. She raises her sons with emotional honesty, teaching them empathy, resilience, and compassion, values she learned alone during her darkest years. Sharon no longer seeks approval from an industry that abandoned her. She approves of herself. That shift, she says, is the greatest victory of her life. Not fame, not money, but self-respect reclaimed after everything tried to take it away. For much of her career, Sharon Stone was reduced to an image created by others. The femme fatale, the untouchable icon, the symbol of power and beauty. But those labels never captured the full truth of who she was, and they certainly didn't survive what she endured. After her stroke, Hollywood quietly tried to close the chapter on her story. But Sharon refused to let others decide where her narrative ended. Instead of chasing the past, she rewrote her legacy from the inside out. She chose projects that respected her intelligence. She spoke when silence was expected. She showed scars in an industry obsessed with illusion. Her legacy is no longer about box office numbers or iconic scenes. It's about survival with integrity. It's about standing back up after being erased. It's about proving that a woman's value does not expire with age, illness, or trauma. Sharon Stone didn't return to Hollywood asking for permission. She returned with truth. And that truth reshaped how her story will be remembered. Sharon Stone's journey is not just a Hollywood story. It's a human one. It reminds us that even those we place on pedestals can be broken, dismissed, and abandoned, and still find the strength to rise again. Her life is proof that survival is rarely glamorous, rarely applauded, and often misunderstood. Yet it is the most courageous act of all. At 66, Sharon Stone speaks not to rewrite history, but to complete it. She speaks for the woman who wasn't believed. For the mother who lost custody while fighting to stay alive. For the survivor who rebuilt her mind, her family, and her purpose from nothing. Now we turn the question to you. Which part of Sharon Stone's story affected you the most? Was it the medical dismissal, the financial betrayal, the loss of her son, or the strength it took to begin again? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more real, deeply human stories from behind the curtain of Hollywood, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and stay with us for the truths that deserve to be heard.